my name's Sasha, and I'm autistic, so for this April, I wanted to share my autism story. There wasn't a really big aha moment when I finally pieced together that I was autistic. I've always known that I was autistic because I was diagnosed whenever I was 3 because I wasn't talking or really responding to people whenever they talked to me. And so my parents took me to some doctors and they were like, yo, your kid is autistic. And so all I really knew autistic meant whenever I was growing up is that it meant that I had to have a lot of therapists, special classes, and that I was a little bit socially awkward. But I mean, what kid isn't socially awkward whenever they're in elementary school? So I mean, it really didn't click all that much. One thing that I did kind of understand whenever I was little is that being autistic was viewed as a bad thing, and that I shouldn't want to be autistic because that meant that I was different. And I saw this other kid in my class, and he was also a special ed student, but he was higher assistance than I was. And so he had an aide following him throughout all day, and he just didn't understand really everything that was going on. And I saw how the other kids acted around him, and they weren't trying to be malicious or anything, but I saw them hanging out with him only because he was different and treating him like he was an idiot and stuff like that. And so I decided that I wasn't going to tell people I was autistic because I didn't want to be treated like I was different. And so I kept it quiet for all of my elementary school years. The older I got, the more I started to really connect that I was different than everybody else. Those other kids who needed aids and stuff and special classes slowly stopped needing those special classes until I was one of the only kids in my class being pulled out aside for things like speech therapy and different reading courses. I was the only kid in my class who had different spelling words than everybody else. And it was embarrassing, and I didn't like standing out like that. I wanted to just fit in and be a normal person. And so over the years, I just started to not like myself because of stuff like that. It wasn't until middle school that I finally connected those things to being autistic. I remember one day in middle school, I was just like, I am autistic. I don't really know what that means though. And so I did a quick Google search. And I looked up the symptoms, and as I read through each and every one of them, I slowly realized that the reason I was struggling to have friends and fit in was because I was autistic. And I absolutely began to hate myself because of it, because all I wanted was to be a normal person and to be able to fit in and have friends and hang out with them and stuff. But everyone just thought I was weird, and so I didn't have that. I continued to, of course, keep my autism a secret through middle school, and then in high school I finally started to make a good friend. This friend had ADHD, and she wasn't too ashamed of being ADHD, and a lot of her symptoms were very similar to the symptoms of my autism, and so we got along amazingly. As our friendship grew, I eventually trusted her enough to tell her that I was autistic. And so she was one of the only students in my school who knew that I was autistic. And it felt really nice to tell her because I had always felt like it was such a big secret to keep and that everyone would treat me horribly different whenever they found out, but she didn't seem to really care that much. She was just like, oh, cool, and kind of moved on with things. And it meant a lot that she did that, because I was incredibly scared I was going to be treated like a freak. But she understood, and we're still best friends to this day. After I got the positive response from telling her that I was autistic, I started to kind of look a bit more into the autism community. And I slowly learned that autism wasn't just a whole bunch of bad traits. It was things like making you more creative and people with autism being able to be more understanding towards people and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And I learned that people loved their autism and that was an option out there. And so I started looking more and more into it, and I slowly started to accept myself and not be ashamed of my autism. It took me a really long time to feel comfortable telling people because I was still horrified that people were going to treat me differently, because all I wanted was to be able to have friends and fit in. I slowly warmed up to the idea of not hiding my autism anymore. And so it was simple things like I wasn't afraid to mention it in conversation. And whenever I had an issue with something, we're like, hey, I can't really do this, and would explain why it related back to my autism and stuff. And eventually I started feeling a lot more comfortable with being autistic and being open about it. And I started getting more and more involved in the community and learning more about different people's lives and experiences and stuff. And so I decided I was going to start doing advocacy stuff at my school. And so I put together presentations and pamphlets and got pins for my friends to wear. And I went around to a whole bunch of the different classes and I taught about what autism was. The response I got from doing all this stuff was mostly positive, and everyone was so supportive and understanding, and it felt amazing. But then there was one instance that made me feel like maybe I shouldn't have done it, that I should have just kept quiet about it. I had been friends with this person for several years at this point. I mean, we weren't close until that year it happened, but whenever he found out I was autistic, he started acting really weird, and he was treating me differently. And I called him out on it, like, I'm still the same person. Just because now I'm open about being autistic doesn't mean that you have to treat me differently. And he just started talking about how uncomfortable it made him feel to be hanging out with an autistic person, and I ended up having to cut him out of my life, even though we were really good friends for a really long time up until he found out I was autistic. But after that, I felt awful, and I was just like, is this something I'm going to have to deal with happening consistently in my life? Are people just going to continue to see me as a freak? And I kept thinking, what if everybody else feels exactly the same way, but they're just being nice about it and not saying anything? It took me a while afterwards to come to this conclusion, but in the end, my conclusion was that I didn't need people who were going to view me differently in my life. And that if he was going to be weird about just me having a different way of perceiving the world, then I didn't need him in my life. If anybody else started feeling differently and weird to be around me because they found out I was autistic, then I didn't need that in my life. It was their problem and not mine. Eventually, I managed to graduate school on time, which was a really big deal because my parents were told that if I did manage to graduate school, then it definitely wouldn't have been on time. But not only did I manage to graduate on time, but I was third in my class, and so my entire family was incredibly proud of me and just really happy that I had managed to come so far. I decided to attend trade school for the culinary arts after I graduated. And it was really weird whenever I showed up because suddenly nobody knew I was autistic again. And I felt kind of awkward trying to be open about it again. And so I almost fell back into that pattern of just not telling anyone because I wanted to be able to make friends here. And I kept thinking about that time where I lost my friend because he found out I was autistic, and I didn't want to be lonely while I was attending this school. But I knew that I didn't want to be around people who would treat me differently because of my autism anyways. And so I pushed through that feeling and I was open about it once again. And once again, for the most part, I had a very positive response, except for one person. She was one of my classmates, and at first we were like okay-ish friends. We'd sit together in class and occasionally hang out and play some board games after school. But she was anti-vax and made a whole bunch of autism jokes. She didn't make these jokes to me, but she'd make them to people around me, and I found out, and so I was incredibly mad because she had sat there pretending to be my friend while insulting me and people like me behind my back. And I thought it was absolutely disgusting that she thought that that would ever be okay behavior. And so I was a little bit petty towards her. And I threw a whole bunch of shade afterwards, and we stopped hanging out entirely. But other than her, all of my responses in trade school were absolutely wonderful. My teachers were understanding and willing to give me a little bit of extra help if I needed it. And I did wonderfully. I tied for top of my class. Now I have a full-time job in my own apartment, and it's wonderful to look back and see where I started and was being told that I'd never be able to live on my own, that I'd never graduate high school, that I would never be able to hold a full-time job, and to see myself being able to do all of those things nowadays is absolutely amazing. And even though I'm at a point of my life where I love and accept myself, autism and all, that doesn't mean that I always love being autistic. And it takes a lot out of me nowadays to talk about the things I don't like about being autistic. Because it kind of makes me feel like I'm starting to hate myself again, even though I know it's perfectly okay to acknowledge that you don't have to love every single part of yourself, and especially not every single part of your disability. But now I still do have communication errors at work. I get overwhelmed going to the store by myself. I had to have a friend drive up to my house so that she could go to the DMV with me because I had a panic attack trying to go to there myself. Restaurants overwhelm me, and I feel so bad whenever my friends invite me to go hang out at an arcade or a concert or something, and I have to tell them no because it's too overwhelming for me. But I am so happy to have found people in my life who are willing to help make accommodations for me, and they don't feel bad whenever I tell them I can't go places, and they understand that it's not that I don't want to go with them, it's that I can't because I have to take care of myself. And they're willing to find different places that we can hang out, that I can go. As much as it is frustrating for me, I understand that it's really important to recognize your limits. That way you don't push yourself too far and absolutely shut down later on. And I am so grateful that I have friends out there that are willing to understand that and help me with stuff like that. It's taken a really long time for me to finally be able to say that I love and accept myself as an autistic person. But I am very happy with who I am today, and I wouldn't rather be anybody else, and without my autism, I wouldn't be me. And so I am very proud of the person I am, autism and all. I hope that you enjoyed my story, and if you'd like to subscribe, then you can. I can't make any promises that I'll post videos regularly, because it takes a lot out of me to be able to record videos like this. But if you would like to see if I'm able to make stuff in the future, then go ahead and subscribe. I probably will make something, it just might be a while. I'd also like to thank my friend Hayden, or Crispy Boy, for allowing me to record at his setup. He makes YouTube videos doing game reviews and stuff. My office right now doesn't have a whole lot of furniture in it, and so it's a really echoey room. And so until I kind of get more stuff in it, I can't really record in there, but I really wanted to make a video for April. So he allowed me to record in his gaming room. So if you like video games and stuff like that, then you should head over to his channel. I'll link it below, and go and subscribe to him. Anyways, thank you. I hope you enjoyed my story. Bye.